Hi, can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay, wonderful. Welcome, everyone. So honored to be here, so honored to be moderating this event. I loved these books. I loved spending time with them, and I can't wait to discuss them with these writers. So what I thought we would do to start was just have Yiyun, Kamila, Sayaka, each of you read a little bit and maybe just talk a bit about the book just to kind of bring us into it. And then we'll go into questions. So maybe since you're right next to me, Yiyun, you can start.
Yes,
yeah.
I will start. I'll just read the opening page and the last page of the book. So you can hear. You won't, it's not a spoiler, the last page. You cannot cut an apple with an apple. You cannot cut an orange with an orange. You can, if you have a knife, cut an apple or an orange, or slice open the underbelly of a fish, or if your hands are steady enough and the blade is sharp enough, sever an umbilical cord. You can slash a book. There are different ways to measure depth, but not many readers measure a book's depth with a knife, making a cut from the first page all the way down to the last. Why not, I wonder? You can hand a knife to another person, betting with yourself how deep a wound he or she is willing to inflict. You can be the inflictor of the wound. One half orange plus another half orange do not make a full orange again. And that is where my story begins. An orange that did not think itself good enough for a knife. An orange that never dreamed of turning itself into a knife. Cut and be cut. Neither interested me back then. I'm going to read the last page. The real story was beyond our ability to tell. Our girlhood, our friendship, our love, all monumental, all inconsequential. The world had no place for two girls like us, though I was slow then, not knowing that Fabian, slighted, thwarted, even fatally wounded, tried to make a fool of that world, on her and on my behalf. Revenge is a story that often begins with more promises than the ending can offer. There she is now, in a grave in Saint Remy. All the pain's over. Tonight I wish she were here, so I could tell her that once again I have written a book, once again with her help. Somewhere I believe, somewhere she is laughing. You are still that silly goose, she says. You dream big, Agnes. But she is wrong about me, just as the world were wrong about us. If my geese ever dream, they alone know that the world will never be allowed even a glimpse of that dream. And they alone know that the world has no right to judge them. I live like my geese. I have interrupted that living to write the story of a faux prodigy, which is the real story of Fabienne and Agnes, as real as on that day when we were in the graveyard, wanting and unable to kill each other, wanting and unable to save each other. Thank you.
So Best of Friends has two protagonists, Mariam and Zara, and the novel switches perspective. I'm reading from near the beginning when they're both 14 years old. It's the first day back at school after the summer holidays. Mariam has been in London, and she looks different to the way she did when she left, as can happen to girls around the age of 14 or 15. It had been happening since last year without anyone but Mariam and her tailor taking much notice, but London had accelerated it. All that chocolate and ice cream and fast food had settled in unexpected places and brought with it the discomfort of underwired bras and a body that felt unknown. For a while in London, she thought she had lost the ability to judge her own dimensions, which was why her breasts kept bumping into strangers, until she realized it was almost never women with whom she was making the unexpected contact. Once understood, she didn't know how she felt about it. Sometimes she wanted to cry, other times she was triumphant. It was purely humiliating, though, to overhear her father tell her mother that she needed to go to Oxford Street and buy their daughter an entirely new wardrobe because all her clothes looked indecent. So out went her favorite shirts, the Madonna one, the tiger with diamante eyes one, the nautical striped ones. The new shirts were looser fitting and without images or ornamentation that might draw people's eyes to her chest. It made little difference to the men bumping into her on the tube, or to that friend of her parents who started squeezing her shoulders affectionately and pulling her close, the way other uncles had always done, but never him. The previous summer in London, she had imagined visibility was what she wanted. In Karachi, men stared if you were a girl. It was something to which she was accustomed and shared with every other girl in the city. In London, people looked through you. The contrast was disquieting. "Notice me, notice me, notice me," she chanted internally when walking down the streets. And now, wish granted, she had passed into a new category of person. Her relationship to the world around her changed. At the same time, everything seemed to carry on as it always had. There was no one in London she could talk to about this. Only on that first day of school, during break time, watching Zara reach over the heads of students standing in front of her to pay the man in the tuck shop for 2 bottles of Coke and 2 packets of chili chips, did it all make sense. There had always been a joke at the heart of their friendship, a gag that appeared first at the visual level before revealing itself to run through many layers. Now there was Zara, all straight lines, and Mariam, all curves, adding another element to their study in contrasts. She wondered if Zara shared this feeling of completeness when they were together, which could surely only be possible when you'd been best friends with someone since the age of 4, and your character had been defined by the other. She suspected not. There were things Zara wanted from the world that Mariam didn't understand, things she found in books and in her own mind, which sometimes wandered far away from Mariam into places she rarely talked about, because she knew Mariam couldn't follow her there. When Zara did say things like, "Do you think everyone has a purpose in life, or do people invent purpose to stop feeling irrelevant?" Mariam never knew how to answer. She didn't know which part of the question made less sense to her, purpose or irrelevant. She had tried to come up with an answer, something to do with wanting to expand her family's business into the international market, and Zara had frowned and said, "That's ambition, not purpose." Thank you.
あ、こんにちは。私は、生命式という短編から友達の山本さんが亡くなって彼を、弔うために料理をするところを読みます。
Hello, everyone. I'm going to be reading from my collection, Life Ceremony. This takes place after the protagonist's friend, Yamamoto, has passed away, and they're having a ceremony to commemorate. Is it possible to bring up the lights a little bit? It's dark.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. 私はマジックで腕肉と書かれている箱を探し出すと持ち上げて台所へと進んだ。皮を剥いて血抜きしてある山本の腕を取り出し肉をそぎ落とす作業に入った。妹も急いで違う発泡スチロールを台所に運び込み中から山本の太ももを取り出した。じゃあ私は角煮の下準備をします。お母さん、お肉の下ごしらえ用のお湯を沸かして。テキパキと妹が指示を飛ばし、私たちは急いで山本のレシピ通りに彼を料理し始めた。業者がかなりの部分まで作業してくれていると言っても、やっぱりまだ山本の形が残っている。よく一緒にビールを乾杯した山本の毛深くて力強い腕を思い浮かべながら、私は包丁で肉をそぎ落としていた。落ち込んだ時、この手に背中をポンと叩かれたこともあったし、酔っ払って足元がおぼつかない私を車道から引っ張ってくれたこともあった。喫煙室で山本の腕に灰を落としてしまった時は、熱いだろと情けない顔で赤くなった腕に息を吹きかけていた。そうだ、月曜日だってこの手は私の背中を励ますように叩いてくれていた。その大きくて優しい腕が今は骨付き肉になってまな板の上にある。
I found the box with arm meat written on it, lifted it up, and took it into the kitchen. I took out Yamamoto's arms, skinned and drained of blood, and began the task of cutting the flesh away from the bone. Meanwhile, his sister rushed in with another styrofoam box and took out Yamamoto's thighs. Okay, she said, I'll get on with preparing the meat for braising. Mom, can you boil some water to be ready for parboiling? With his sister briskly issuing instructions, we quickly got on with making Yamamoto into the recipes he prepared. The professionals had done a good amount of the work for us, but you could still make out the form of Yamamoto in the meat. He and I had often gone out drinking together, and now, as I stripped the flesh from the bone, I remembered his strong, hairy arms lifting his beer glass. These very arms had patted me on the back when I was down, and had dragged me out of the road when I was unsteady on my feet after drinking too much. Once, in the smoking room, I dropped ash on his arm, and he'd blown on the red patch and said reproachfully, "Ouch, that's hot." And just last Monday, this hand had given me an encouraging pat on the back. His big, gentle arms were now meat on the bone, lying quietly on the chopping board.
Okay, that was great. Thank you so much for reading. I think how we'll kind of start the discussion maybe is I'll ask each of you a question about your work and how it relates to friendship. And then I'll move into general questions and you can take turns answering. We'll just kind of go down the line. But I'll start with Kamila. What I loved about Best of Friends, not only is it just a haunting and really powerful meditation on childhood friendship and how it shifts as these women become adults, but it's also a brilliant exploration of girlhood, what it's like to be a young woman and to grow into your body with all its dangers and wonders and complications, as you read that incredible passage. So I wanted to ask you, in your book, you explore this idea of propinquity and friendship. Zara and Miriam, they're best friends at 14, and they distinguish themselves from the others in their school by saying, we're not friends because of physical proximity. We'd be friends no matter where we were in the world. But it got me thinking about the mysterious nature of friendship, of why certain people are drawn to each other, especially in childhood. And Yiyun, you explore this too. I love this quote: "Childhood friendship, much more fatally, simply happens." So I'm wondering, how much does proximity play a role in this friendship versus other factors? And what is it that draws Zara and Miriam together and keeps them together for so long?
I'm so glad you used that word mysterious, because I do think there is a deep mystery to friendships, particularly childhood friendships. And with Zara and Miriam, they become friends at the age of 4. That's almost before you have character or knowledge of each other. But the thing about your earliest childhood friends is they're the first people in most people's lives. They're the first people you choose and are chosen by. And I think there's a real profundity to that. And they're the first people you want, you don't want them to unchoose you.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine if you're 8 or 10 and your best friend decides they want another best friend? I mean, how could anyone ever recover from this? And in this case, but if you watch children, friendships are born from nothing more than we had fun together. We sat next to each other in the classroom. I mean, with Zara and Miriam, the earliest memory they have of each other, which is in fact one of my earliest memories of a childhood friend, is one of them helps the other one tie her shoelaces. And from things like that, a friendship can be formed. But it's not just propinquity, which is about closeness. It's about time.
Yeah.
And if you go just from 4 to 14, I mean, that is such a long stretch of time. No 10 years will ever be as long as 4 to 14. And the amount you know about each other, and you trust each other with your secrets. And I think one of the interesting things with childhood friendships is when you're 14, quite likely no one is more important to you than your best friend.
Yeah.
And then you get older and other kinds of relationships come in the way and other friendships come along. But I think there's something very interesting that happens, and I think it happens with them as well, when you're, say, in your 40s. And in their case, I think it's exacerbated by them both living away from the place in which they grew up and living away from their parents. And your childhood friends are the people who know what you were like when you were a child in your family home. And I think particularly as your parents get older and more frail, that becomes really significant, because it means they also know what you're losing when you're losing that relationship. And those kind of things, I think I wanted very much as a sort of subtext in there, but that, yes, as adults, they're vastly different. If they had met for the first time as adults, I'm sure they wouldn't have been friends. But it is that sediment, that palimpsest of history between them, that, there's a line in Zadie Smith's Swing Time: you can't make new old friends.
Yeah.
It's just the basic truth.
It's true. And when you lose a friend, I think a young friend, you're not just losing that friend. I feel like you're losing yourself too. Like they kind of hold your past. Yeah. And I thought that very, very true for Zara and Miriam. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask Yiyun a question, very much related. So again, another wonderful exploration of young female friendship and creativity, and so intimate and funny and devastating to read. And I love the way that you brought creativity into this friendship. So I wanted to ask about that. Fabienne and Agnes write books together. It's part of their friendship. It's a game that they play to make these other worlds, with Fabienne telling the stories and Agnes writing them down. And I won't spoil it by sharing further, except to say that this game has life-changing consequences for both of them. And later, Fabienne also creates another character for Agnes to write to when she's away at finishing school. So there are different ways in which creativity and writing are shaping their bond. And I wanted to ask, what drew you to explore childhood friendship and creativity, especially creative writing in this way? And what's the relationship between them for you?
Right. Thank you, Mona. And I agree with Kamila. I think the quote you quote is childhood friendship was fatal,
Yeah.
and it is exactly as you said. It is fatal because how two people, young little people meet and become friends. It's mysterious, but it's also. I remember when I was 4, I thought I want to move in with my best friend. It made total sense to me, but it did not make sense to the world. And I think that bigger world has all the rules for young people. Well, we, little people living in our little minds, why can't we move together? Why can't we just live together our happy life? And I think, that question has always baffled me since I was 4. But with these Fabienne and Agnes, I think they happened to, grow up in the post-World War II French countryside, and they had all the freedom to really live together when they were young, because no grown-ups were supervising them, and they had the freedom to run amok in the countryside. So I think in that sense they were luckier than most children. But as you said, they started to make a game about writing books. Again, Kamila just said, childhood friends, they define each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what these two, they actually write their stories together. They make up books together, because that's how they, at one point Agnes asked Fabienne and said, why do you want to write a book? And Fabienne said, so the world knows what it feels like to be us. And I think that's something that I do watch children too. I think sometimes once we pass childhood, we forget what it feels to be a child. And I think Fabienne, in a way, she is very certain that the world is not paying attention to them. And they are 2 wild girls in the countryside. But why not, her point is, why not let the world know who we are and know how wonderful we are, how superior we are. And they are, superior to most of the people in Paris and London, all those boring people.
Yes.
I mean, especially the boring people in publishing, right? They want to make something out of these 2 girls. So I think I enjoy their certainty. They're so certain about things, even though they're wrong.
Yeah.
But that's how it means to be a child.
Yeah.
Or how it means to have a childhood friendship, because that's how you live and how you define the world. So these 2 girls, I think they just go out to conquer the world with their very strange friendship. But as Agnes writes towards the end, it's not only a childhood friendship, it's also a love story.
Yes.
It's a love story between 2 young girls before they have any sense of their sexuality or sexual attraction, which is why, any love story in that state cannot last. And the reason is Fabienne introduces a fake boy, fictional boy, into this triangle and make a love story between 2 people, into a triangle love story. So it's a complicated but very fun. I had a good time following them. Of course, I had a good time being devastated by their stories in the end.
I definitely was, and I loved Jacques, the boy, and I love that Agnes can say different things to Jacques than she can to Fabienne. I just love the freedom of that. It actually speaks to a story in Sayaka's collection that I love, Hatchling, where Sayaka's main character, Haruka, is different selves with different friends, which I just thought is very brilliant. And I wanted to ask a question about Sayaka's collection a bit more broadly, but then I'll come back to that story. So my question for you, Sayaka, and I loved this collection so much. It embodies everything I love about your work. It's so provocative and visceral and strange, and just very, very honest, even as it feels kind of a little bit unreal. So what struck me very profoundly from the first story onwards was the almost dystopian quality of some of the stories. They often feel like they take place in a world that is both like and not like ours. Customs and rituals have shifted. This is a world where we wear the body parts of our dead, as in the opening story of First Rate Material, where we eat our dead, as in Life Ceremony. And often they take the perspective of a character that is a little estranged from that world and must learn to move through it. So my question to you is, what made you want to explore these sorts of customs and to view them from this particular outsider perspective?
Ah, なんだろう、世界に馴染めない感覚というのは私にとってすごく馴染み深いもので、子どもの頃から私は上手に友達を作ることができなくて、ずっと嘘の言葉しか喋ることができなくて、ずっと疎外感を抱いていました。だから、何か小説を書くときにアウトサイダーな気持ちを抱いている人を書くのは、そういう人がとても私にとって身近だからだと思います。はい。なんだろう、偽った仮面で喋っていたという感じです。はい。
So when you talk about the strangeness of this world, something that you are not quite blending into, that's a feeling that I'm very familiar with. When I was little, I had a lot of difficulty making friends as a child. I sort of put a fake face towards the world, and I had a strong sense of estrangement in terms of how I felt. So when I'm creating my work in the novels that I create, it really is familiar to me writing from the stance of an outsider. And
そして私は時々短長編でも奇妙な世界を描きますが、私の感覚としては不思議な世界を描いているのではなくて、私にとってのリアリズム、私のような人間から見た世界のリアルを描きたいと思った時に、少し奇妙な世界とかパラレルワールドのようなそういう世界がより私にとってリアルな感覚、生々しい感覚を描くことができるので、よくそういう小説を書きます。
So sometimes, also when I'm writing my work, whether it's short stories or novels, you refer to it as sort of being a strange world or different from the world that we're used to. I don't necessarily see it that way. For me, it's actually maybe how I see the world. So I try to incorporate that into my novels writing in the way that I actually do really see the world, but it comes out slightly strange or in that sort of different version of the world. But for me, it's something that I really feel, and I want to try to convey this sense and this perhaps it's the vividness that comes across in my writing. That's something that is there.
I love that. Okay, that's great. Maybe I have time to just ask one more thing about the collection. For me, there was this recurring question of how to be true to oneself and one's body in a world that asks us to kind of conform, versus how we change ourselves in order to adapt, and how these two things can conflict, and both can result in a kind of estrangement from either from others or from oneself, depending on whether or not you're true to yourself or you adapt. And I wondered what drew you towards exploring that particular conflict. And you've spoken a little bit about it, but if you want to talk a little bit more about it.
多分普段からなんとなく自分のことを空っぽのコップのように思っていて、外から入ってきたもの、例えば友達とか家族とか見た漫画とか本とか、そういうものから入ってきたものが自分を今喋らせていると思う時があります。その言葉が自分から湧き出ているのか、でも外から入った何かが自分の中で混ざり合って吐き出されているのか、どちらか分からなくなる時があります。 今自分の言葉と思っているものがどこから来たのか、よくそのことを考えています。はい。
So regularly, somehow when I think about myself, I feel like I might be along the lines of an empty cup, meaning that things are coming in and filling me, whether that is from friends or family or maybe a comic book or a book or any kind of media that I've consumed. And these things come to occupy me and myself. And then when I talk or I express myself, it's not always clear what the source of where that is, where that's coming from, whether it's something that I'm surprising myself by saying, or is it something that was mixed in from all these outside sources. There's times where I hear myself talking and I'm not quite sure what the source of what I'm saying is. This is something I think about very often.
なので、例えば不可、おっしゃってくださった不可という小説を書いたとき、すごく自分に近い人物だと思いました。周りに合わせて喋っている。それは全くの嘘ではないのだけれど、なんとなく空気に合わせて言葉がリズムを作っている。例えば今も、こういうイベントに来たときにたまに思うのは、日本のイベントは皆さん、こうきちんとした格好で喋っていて、でもこう海外のイベントに来ると皆さんがリラックスしていると思う時があります。私は何度かのフェスティバルでトライしてみましたが難しかったです。でもそんな風にこの漂ってる空気とか、他の人の行動をトレースしたり、そういう部分が自分にはすごくあって、それは人間の何か奇妙な特性、奇妙な習性だと思っていて、それが好きで気になっています。イギリスです。はい。
So you referred to Hatchling from the collection, and I think that character is actually fairly close to me in that in my own life I do try to sometimes match the people around me. I'm not quite not telling the truth, but it's more a sense of reading the room or making myself compatible with the people around me, and then I create a sort of rhythm based on that. One thing I have noticed is an event like tonight, a lot of my fellow authors and people who participate in these events it's a cultural difference from Japan where we have these events where people tend to be sort of very proper and more formal, and it's a little bit more relaxed at overseas events. I actually attempted to tried to do that at a festival in England, but I wasn't so successful. But yes, that was a difference that I had noticed. And then in terms of that, I think this is something ごめんなさい、最後の方はその人にはごめん、フェスの後はちょっとまあ好きですそのこと。その人間の習性に興味があります。But I actually do enjoy noticing these differences and seeing the differences in these peculiarities of how people move and behave. It interests me very much.
Yeah, no, I mean it's such a powerful story, and it's so interesting that it comes up in the Book of Goose, and it also comes up in Best of Friends. This idea of how our friends make us, you know, in so many ways. So that sort of brings me to a general question that I have for the three of you. Maybe we can just go down the line, and I'll ask, and then you can answer. So there's this idea running through all these books that our friends make us, and I thought a lot about Sayaka's story, of course, which we just talked about, and the idea is explored in your novel too, Yiyun. I'm thinking about when Agnes reflects. I would have been one of them, meaning the uninteresting girls, had Fabienne not been in my life. What a tragedy that would have been, living an interchangeable life, looking for interchangeable excitements. I love that. And then in Best of Friends, of course, Zara and Miriam, I think about, I won't spoil, but there's this incredible night that happens towards the end of their time in Karachi in the late 80s that changes both of them and the course of their lives forever. And they are changed in part by each other's actions too. So I'm wondering, to what degree are our friends responsible for who we become? how did the question of who I am versus who I must be for this person inform your book? And what is the relationship for each of you, just thinking about your work, between friendship and the self? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just, I just need to tell one more thing about the book.
Yes.
Is Fabian and Agnes, they're good friends, and they start to write the book together. But Fabian decided just to put one name on the book. It's her decision, which is very interesting. I noticed that when I tour the book, American readers often ask, but why doesn't Fabian want the credit? And it's a very American idea, like if you write a book, you need to claim the credit. But Fabian is not interested in claiming the credit. She's more interested in making things happen in the story. I think friendship to them, and also I just think about in general, friendship among younger people. It's not about how to achieve something according to the grown-up standard, whether you publish a book or you make a play or you write a, symphony. It is more about how you can do things to change your lives together.
Right.
And I think that's the key to their friendship. As Fabian said, I'm going to make this book and you're going to put your name on it, and both our lives will be changed forever. And I think that to me is the essence of childhood friendship. As you said, two friends grow together, also define each other. But there's also, I think the devastating part is, friends make each other, but then there's a moment that they have to unmake themselves from the other. And I think that is, towards the end, Agnes realized she has to make a story of her own life without Fabian. So I think that's just, in general, something. I believe in fiction, it's just something good happens. Of course, something bad will happen too, and then you just have to deal with the bad things. So
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I think friends make us, but we also kind of have to make ourselves by unmaking the friendship, right? Yeah, Kamila, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that puts it beautifully, because with Mariam and Zara, they always know they're very different, but it's sort of, when they're young, it's a kind of a complementary difference, and one is the more outgoing one is the more studious one is more responsible, and so but through the other person you get to have an almost vicarious experience of what it's like to live without rules in the way that Mariam does, or what it's like to have the very close-knit family in the way that Zara does. But I think there does come the moment where you are in a moment together, and with the book you refer to, there's a night where certain things happen, which are quite scary for them. And they both bear different kinds of responsibility, and yet at the end it's not, they're 14-year-old girls, and neither of them is truly responsible. But this question of who is responsible, who was responsible for making the thing go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing that went wrong, sort of, it's seeded through the rest of their lives. And it's not that their lives are terrible, not at all. And yet their lives would have been different if both of them had acted differently on that one night. And you always carry this knowledge that if she hadn't done it, if I hadn't done it. And it's this interesting thing of what you do with that knowledge, that both of you were imperfect, which of course you were, because you're human and you were kids. Both of you were imperfect, but you never, that for all the closeness of your friendship, the one thing that their friendship doesn't have is the ability to just look at each other and say, this is the way in which I messed up. This is the way in which you messed up. You could have done that at 14 or 15, and in some way, a thing would have been set to rest. But again, it goes back to that palimpsest. What happens if for 30 years, for 30 years you are living in the consequence of that night, and you're feeling guilt for your part, and you're feeling resentment for the other person's part, And so I think there's this very convoluted way in which ultimately it's about what do we do about mingled histories. You know, you live closely to someone else, and the decisions both of you make have an impact on each other. And there are consequences, and in your brain there's always this version of this other life that could have happened. And if I hadn't been your friend, this other life could have happened, and it might have been better, it might have been worse.
Right.
We don't know that. But there's some strange uncertainty that has entered the equation now. You know, that this is my life now because we did that.
Right.
And we never account for it or acknowledge it in our friendship because it seemed big then, and now 30 years later it should seem much smaller.
Right.
And it sort of does until it doesn't. So I think it is this question of what do you do about the fact that your life is always going to be thrown in one direction or another by the fact that you love other people.
Yeah.
And that they are imperfect and you are imperfect. You know, that basic odd truth of it is, I think, ultimately at the heart of it.
Yeah.
That neither know quite what to do 30 years later with this thing that happened.
Yeah.
You know, but you change each other and you change each other's lives very dramatically. And sometimes just it happens in one single moment, one night when you're 14 years old. Someone gets into the wrong car. Someone else decides to follow her. And that's your life now.
Yeah. No, it's an incredible moment in the story, and it's true that I mean, I wonder how much of their friendship is held together by the absence of acknowledgement, right? Just the decision not to say versus saying, which would definitely rupture something. So yeah, no, I think that's just a truth of all friendship, right? How many unsayable things do we kind of carry in every relationship that we have?
I mean, it should be said, you don't want to always be honest.
Right.
It's the most overrated thing on the planet. If you were always honest to everyone you loved,
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the cruelest thing you could possibly do. But, you know, it can be problematic when you're not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that segues nicely into Sayaka's work. So for you, Sayaka, what is the relationship for you between friendship and the self? Because your stories do explore that tension. Yeah.
この日本版のペーパーバッグに友達がエッセイを書いてくれました。喫茶店で友達を話していると、どちらが言ったことか分からなくなることがあると、もしくは言葉だけでは言葉や考え方だけじゃなくて実際に、唾液が飛んだり菌が飛んだり、本当に物質的な何かを交換しているということがエッセイに書いてあってすごく面白い視点だなと思いました。
Actually, in the Japanese version, the paperback that we have in Japan, I had a friend who wrote an essay, and she talks about how when you're talking with a friend at a coffee shop, it's not just who's saying what in a conversation or what words are being used. She thought about it, and she was saying that it actually goes beyond that to a very physical exchange where there's saliva and bacteria and other things floating in the air. And I thought that was a very interesting point of view.
Yeah.
そしてなんか私が思うのはすごく混ざり合ってる感じがする時は嬉しかったり怖くなったりする時があります。その人が普段から考えてることがいつの間にか自分から発生したり、何かの大きな選択をする時に信頼してる友達の言葉が背中を押したりストップしたり、または逆に誰かが私の友達が何か大きな決断をしようとしている時に、彼女の人生を思ってその人をコントロールしようとしたり、それが成功してしまったりすることがあります。それは 思っているより日常的に行われていると思いますが、たまにすごく怖くなる時があります。
So in regard to that, when I think about it, I become very happy as well as scared when I think about all these feelings and these things mixing together. Because when I think about things that people who normally are around you say, sometimes it get woven into things that I say, and I can't always differentiate. One example might be if I have to make a big decision in something in my life, I might consult a friend of mine who I trust, who might push me in one direction or prevent me from going in a certain direction. Or the opposite case might be true. If I have a friend who has to make a big decision in their life, I might try and offer my perspective in thinking about that person's life and try to maybe control the outcome in a certain way and potentially succeed in the process of doing that. I think these kinds of things happen more frequently than we actually realize, and I actually find that pretty scary.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. I'm getting I think we should just move over to audience questions just to make sure that you have an opportunity to ask. And then if I have a chance to ask another question, I will, but I want to give you the opportunity to ask the questions.
Hi. This question's for Mona because,
Okay.
yeah, I just thought you should get to answer a question too. This one's about friendship and all's well.
Sure.
I guess I just wanted to ask your general thoughts on writing friendship that kind of involves like a loneliness when the other person doesn't acknowledge something super important in your life. Like the narrator's one kind of friend throughout the book expresses doubts about the narrator's chronic pain. So I guess my question is just about how you wrote that dynamic.
Yeah, thank you so much. So just asking a question about these two characters in my last novel, All's Well. One of whom is well and like kind of New England well, like she's very healthy, and then the other one is grappling with chronic pain in a very real way, and there's a lot of tension between the two of them because of that. It was hard because I felt like the healthy friend was very well-meaning ultimately. It's just that there's a ceiling that we all have in terms of being able to inhabit the other person's experience. There's a ceiling that we have in terms of empathy, and I was really interested in that in depicting their friendship. So I wanted to show that there was love there, but I also wanted to show that even though we would love for our friends' capacities to be limitless, they're just not, And yeah, I was really interested in that, in exploring those two. I would say they are good friends, even though they cause each other a lot of pain, and one of them is often very alone. So yeah, thank you so much.
Hello. I guess I just wanted to ask a more personal question about like you guys and your relationships with your best friends, but like what are the qualities that you love most about like your respective friendships?
Oh yeah. Go ahead, who'd ever like to answer?
Everybody.
Yeah, just jump on in.
Well, I'll just go.
Yeah.
It's personal, right? So yeah, I have a couple good best friends. You're asking about best friends. I think what Kamila said, sometimes I think best friends, we actually save each other's memories in each other's brain. Sometimes my best friend would say to me, "You said this 5 years ago." I don't remember, but being reminded, I said that 5 years ago, I could say, oh, I have come a long way. I'm becoming a much wiser person. So I think I really agree with Mona. I think friends are, there's a limit. There's always, imperfection in friendship, but I think I would just say my best friends and we save. I think we hold. I always say best friends are the placeholders of my life. They hold a place for me, and I hold a place for them. So that's just a good placeholding thing for each other.
I love that. Kamila, did you want to?
Yeah, I think that says it beautifully. I mean, I have best friends from different stages of my life, and they do take up different roles. But this is a sort of indirect answer about one of the things that can be so important. And there are versions of yourself that only exist with certain people sometimes. And again, going back to that idea of childhood friendship, I was sitting with one of my closest childhood friends, talking about another one of our closest childhood friends. And I said, I saw her a couple of years ago, and her son said something which made me feel a little sad. He said, Mama never laughs with us the way she laughs with you. And then my other best friend, he said, I don't think that's sad. I said, why is it not sad? He said, because he said, my wife has said the same to me, that you laugh differently. And he said, it's not that we're not happy with the people in our adult life. It's just that we have a different form of laughter. And I said, oh, child laughter. And he said, yeah, when you're with your childhood friends, because you are that 4-year-old version or that 10-year-old version or that 14-year-old version, and you know the way kids laugh hysterically and without restraint about the stupidest thing, I can do that with my closest childhood friends, and I can do it about a thing that we found funny when we were 7, which really was never funny. But now it is the most hilarious thing in the world, and I can still be sort of physically reduced to kind of, that kind of laughter where you have to lean against the wall for support. And so I think that there's something about some of my closest friends is that version of me that you didn't have to deal with anything more complicated than, oh no, there's an exam tomorrow, which I haven't studied enough for. So there's that, and of course then there are the other friends who are the people, and it might be the same people, who will call you. It's not always who you can call, but there's something incredibly moving about being the person that someone will call at any time of day or when something terrible has happened, just to say, this awful thing has happened. And my first response is, I need you to know. And to be that person in someone's life, or to have that person in your life is, again, it goes back to that mystery.
Yeah.
It's invaluable. And I think we all, if you don't have that, and it very often is a friend, for all that people have partners and children and parents and all that, there's often that one friend in this particular crisis, that is the friend I will call.
Yes.
そう私は、さっき話したように子供の頃あまり友達がうまく作れなかったので、大人になっていろんな心の、隠し持ってた部分を少しずつ話せるようになりました。それはすごく私にとって嬉しかったし、嘘ではない隠していた言葉で喋ることができるようになったと感じました。私にも何人か今は親友と呼べる友達がいて、ただその親友の私のカミラさんの話にちょっと似てるんですけど、タッチする人生の部分が違うと思います。一人とはすごく小説の話が好きな子で、小説の話や言葉の話を意識しなくてもいつの間にかいつもそういう話になっています。もう他の友達は、私はちょっとオタクでもあるのでアニメーションや漫画の中の好きな人の話を、もしくは性的な衝動とかものすごくプライベートな体の話を共有します。その友達によって見せる側面、体や精神の側面、人生の側面が 違っていて、それが全部複合的に合わさって、それを全部大切にしています。
So for me, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I had a very hard time making friends when I was little. So when I became an adult and I was able to make friends, I was able to, little by little, share the things that I was holding very close to my heart when I was younger. I was able to actually talk about these things. That made me very happy that I was able to bring to the light these things that, again, I had sort of hidden and kept inside me, and I was able to talk about them. It's similar to what Kamila was saying, but I do have friends that are in accordance with different aspects of myself or different aspects of my life. I have one friend who loves talking about novels and writing and words, and even if we aren't intentional about it, somehow our conversation always deviates towards those topics. And then I have other friends or a friend who are like myself, who's a bit of a otaku or a nerd. So I really like anime and manga and these sorts of things, and we're able to talk about those things, maybe other sexual topics, something about actually our bodies and those sorts of physical things. So that's a different kind of conversation I have with that friend or friends. So I'm able to show different parts of myself depending on who the respective friends are, whether it's physical, spiritual, different parts of our lives. And then I sort of all, for me, I value the sort of the coming together, the compound version of all these parts of my life and these friends.
Yeah, I would say that's true for me too. I feel the same way. There's like a very particular person for each thing, just like you were saying, Kamila. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Hi. I had a question, I think, for everyone. I feel like there's, in each of these works, kind of this thing of like friend love and romantic love bumping up against each other or being blurry. And I was just wondering about what the experience of writing friend love versus romantic love was, just in terms of like your writing process and how you kind of reconciled those themes in each of the books.
Go first. Oh. Friend love versus romantic. Yeah, they're very intertwined because friendship, or at least the kinds of friendships that I'm interested in exploring, just have that deep intimacy where the lines are really blurred there. So I guess it very much just feels like writing about love. And it's wonderful. You know, it feels like I really connected to this idea, and I think it's there in all the works of just building a world together, because that's very much like what writing is. Writing is a kind of friend, you know. So yeah, you're inhabiting this special world, just the two of you, and yeah, it feels like love. Yeah.
Yeah, I that's wonderful. I also think some writers are good at writing romantic loves. Some writers are good at writing friendships. I'm just not interested in writing romantic love. I think I'm more interested in this, you know, ambivalence between friends, because I think this clearly shows my limitation. I feel that when you have a romantic relationship, there seems to be a goal there. You know, a very specific goal is to make love or make something last forever and ever and all these things. So, but I think friendship is just not as clear. It's very muddied relationship. And this muddied relationship, it's a little muddled relationship. It's more interesting, as you said, it's just a love relationship, but with a lot of complications.
Yeah.
And there's no clear right and wrong. And as someone said, you know, if your romantic lover, you know, abandons you, said, I'm going to take another lover, that's just betrayal. But
Yes.
your best friend can say, now I have a better friend, or not better, I have another friend. That's sort of hurtful too.
it is.
So I always like to write about friendship.
Yeah, me too.
But I'm sort of thinking about the fact that you said friendship love and romantic love rather than friendship love and sexual love. Because those are very distinct, but I mean, the Book of Goose is a great romance. Because that's true. Right, there's a great, and I think friendship does have a great romance to it. And it's not a sexual, I mean, it can be in some cases, but, largely or often it's not, but it's still that incredible romance of friendship and that intensity. And when you first find that person and you just want to hang out with them all the time and they get you, and so I think there is a huge romance to it. And I think part the fun for me of writing Best of Friends was sort of to write in their teenage years where it is that massive romance stage, and then you write to come back to them in their middle age when it's all a bit frayed at the edges, and the sheen of the romance has worn off, but there you both still are.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, very romantic also.
Yes,
there you both
it
still
is. Definitely is.
そうですね。私も恋愛のロマンチックを書くのはあまり得意ではないです。恋愛のロマンチックよりも何かそこにある嘘とか妄想とか、本当は恋ではなかったものとかおぞましさとかそういうことを書くのは好きですが、ロマンチックで美しい恋愛を書くことはあまり興味が昔からないです。
In the same way, I'm also not as suited towards writing about romantic love. I think more than that, I like to look at different things, whether it's the non-truths that we tell, delusions, illusions, things like that. I tend to gravitate towards something that seems like love, but it really isn't, maybe appalling aspects, things like that. From a long time ago, I really just didn't have an interest in looking at the aspects of romantic love. Yeah, that wasn't where I was.
Yeah.
けれど私は最初の頃のデビューした頃の作品はいつも友達がいない女の子、思春期の女の子ばっかり書いていました。ある時編集者さんが村田さんの書く主人公はいつも友達がいないので、友達がいる小説を書いてみたらいかがですかと言われて、初めて本当だと思って友達がいる人間を書きました。それで思いました。すごく私はその友情というものがなんかよく例えば恋愛っていうものをものすごく何度も恋愛の漫画や映画やドラマを見て学習させられてきたような典型的なストーリーみたいなものが自分の中になくて、友情というものはすごく不思議で曖昧で液体みたいに溶けていて、友情とも呼べない名前のない何かだったりする、そういう関係についてよく考えるようになりました。
But ever since my debut, I had been writing with main characters as teenage girls who were in puberty, and they were sort of isolated, didn't have very many friends. So my editor said to me, maybe you might want to write a character who has friends. So with that proposal, I attempted to, and I realized in the process of doing that in relation to writing about friendship, I think that I really was raised on all your typical romantic manga and movies and things like that I absorbed. But within myself, that wasn't where my stories were oriented, the typical sort of romantic love story. I think when I look at friendship as a subject for a story, I find it to be a bit more vague. It's something that can almost melt like a liquid. It doesn't necessarily have a name to it. And I think it's those characteristics that I want to explore and that I enjoy.
Yeah, same for me. Yeah, thank you all. I think I should close because I think we're out of time. So it was such an honor to speak with you all. Thank you all so much for coming.